December 25, 2009, Christmas Day. High above the Atlantic Ocean, Northwest Airlines Flight 253 was just 20 minutes from landing in Detroit, Michigan. The cabin lights were dimmed. Passengers were stretching, smiling, and getting ready to reunite with family for the holidays. But in seat 19A, a 23-year-old man quietly reached into his underwear and pulled out a small packet filled with explosive powder. His hands were shaking. His heart was racing, but his mission was clear. He sprinkled the powder into a syringe filled with liquid, then pressed the syringe into the packet to set off a chemical reaction. The plan: blow a hole in the side of the airplane and kill nearly 300 people on board. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then, fire. A flash. Smoke. A loud pop. The man's pants burst into flames. Passengers screamed as fire licked up his legs. People jumped from their seats. One man lunged across the aisle and tackled him. Another poured water to douse the fire. The would-be bomber, Umar Farouk Abdulmutallab, screamed in pain as flames scorched his body. Flight attendants shouted for help. A Dutch passenger pinned him down as others tied his hands with belts. The man kept repeating, "There's more! There's more!" But there wasn't. The device had failed. It fizzled instead of exploding. And that single failure saved every soul on Flight 253. But who was this quiet young man? And how did he manage to board a plane to the United States with a bomb hidden in his underwear? And how, in just a few hours, would the FBI piece together a global terror plot stretching from Africa to the Middle East and change airport security forever? 6 months earlier, on the other side of the world, a different scene was unfolding. It was the summer of 2009, and Umar Farouk Abdulmutallab was living a life many would envy. He was born into wealth, the son of a respected Nigerian banker. He had attended top schools in Africa and Europe. He was soft-spoken, polite, and well-educated. Friends described him as shy, but deeply religious. He was passionate about his faith, and by his early 20s, he was spending more and more time online, visiting religious forums and watching videos about politics and war. At first, it was harmless curiosity, but over time, his online activity grew darker. He began frequenting extremist websites, places where charismatic speakers twisted religion into violent ideology. They told him the West was evil. They showed graphic images of wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. They told him it was his duty to fight back. And slowly, their words sank in. By 2008, Umar's friends noticed a change. He stopped socializing. He started writing long messages about injustice and martyrdom. His father grew worried. So worried that he reported his son to U.S. officials at the embassy in Abuja, Nigeria. It was a warning that would later haunt investigators. A warning that no one acted on in time. But at that moment, Umar was already slipping beyond anyone's reach. By the spring of 2009, Umar had vanished. He told his family he was going to Dubai to study. Instead, he traveled to Yemen, a country that had become a growing hub for extremist networks. In the mountains of Yemen, Umar met members of a group calling itself Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, AQAP. They were looking for young men like him, well-educated, fluent in English, and able to travel freely. He was exactly what they wanted. They trained him in secrecy. They taught him how to avoid detection at airports. They introduced him to a bomb maker who had developed a new kind of device, one that could pass through metal detectors and traditional security screenings. The explosive material, called PETN, was highly powerful but nearly impossible to detect. And because it was sewn into the lining of underwear, it could be carried past even the most advanced scanners of the time. It was a terrifying innovation. For months, Umar trained with them. He learned how to detonate the device using a syringe filled with liquid chemicals. He memorized his cover story and rehearsed his journey. Then, in December 2009, he was ready. On December 24, 2009, Umar boarded a flight from Lagos, Nigeria, to Amsterdam, Netherlands. He carried only a small carry-on bag and a valid U.S. visa. His name was on no watch list. No alarm bells rang. In Amsterdam, he transferred to Northwest Flight 253, bound for Detroit, Michigan. It was Christmas Eve. Most passengers were thinking of family and holiday meals. None had any idea that one seat held a bomb. Umar sat quietly near the window, reading a book and occasionally closing his eyes. Flight attendants described him as calm and polite. The 8-hour flight was uneventful. The plane crossed the Atlantic smoothly, approaching U.S. airspace. And then, as the plane descended toward Detroit, Umar made his move. He waited until the final 20 minutes of the flight, the point when passengers often loosen their seatbelts and relax. Then, he slipped a small syringe from his pocket and pushed it into the sewn pouch in his underwear. The reaction began. The plan was simple. The chemicals would react, generating intense heat that would detonate the detonate explosive. That explosion would rip open the side of the aircraft at 10,000 feet. But instead of an explosion, there was only fire. Passengers later described a loud pop, then smoke and flames erupting from Umar's seat. A Dutch filmmaker named Jasper Scheringa leapt over seats and tackled him. Others helped hold him down as flight attendants grabbed extinguishers. The cabin filled with the smell of burned fabric and scorched skin. Some passengers screamed, others prayed. The pilots immediately declared an emergency. Within minutes, the plane touched down at Detroit Metropolitan Airport and was met by armed federal agents. Umar was pulled from the plane, severely burned but alive. He was taken into custody and rushed to a nearby hospital under heavy guard. What investigators learned next would stun them. The FBI launched its investigation within minutes of the plane's landing. They interrogated passengers, collected evidence from Umar's seat, and secured the bomb materials. The results were chilling. The PETN explosive was powerful enough to blow a hole in the fuselage, a hole that could have torn the plane apart in mid-air. The only reason it hadn't worked was a flaw in the chemical reaction. A single mistake had saved nearly 300 lives. Agents quickly realized this wasn't the work of a lone individual. The device was too advanced, the planning too organized. This was part of a larger network, one that stretched far beyond Umar himself. Within hours, the FBI traced his background. They discovered his elite education, his wealthy family, and his sudden disappearance to Yemen. They pieced together his online activity and tracked his communications. The pieces all pointed to one group, Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. It was the same group that had plotted attacks against U.S. embassies and tried to smuggle explosives onto cargo planes. But this time, they had come closer than ever to bringing down a passenger jet. The news broke worldwide within hours. Major networks led with the headline, "Underwear bombing attempt foiled on Christmas Day." Airports across the country tightened security. Passengers were subjected to extra screening. Governments demanded answers. And the question on everyone's mind was simple. How did this man get on a plane with a bomb? It turned out that Umar's name had surfaced before. When his father reported concerns to U.S. officials months earlier, Umar's name was added to a database, but not to the no-fly list. It was one of many small failures that together nearly led to tragedy. That mistake would lead to sweeping changes in how security lists were updated, shared, and monitored, and it forced the U.S. government to rethink how it tracked individuals who had not yet committed a crime but might pose a threat. As Umar lay in a hospital bed under FBI guard, he began to talk. At first, he refused to cooperate, but over the next days, he revealed how he had been recruited, trained, and prepared. He admitted that the bomb maker was a Saudi man known as Ibrahim al-Asiri, one of the most skilled and dangerous in the world. He described how he had sworn allegiance to Al-Qaeda and volunteered for a mission to strike the United States. His goal, he said, was simple: to bring fear to Americans even on their most joyful day of the year. But instead, his plan had backfired. And now, he was the one facing a lifetime in a U.S. prison. And yet, even as Umar was interrogated, The FBI knew the story wasn't over. Someone had built that bomb. Someone had sent him. Someone was still out there. And they were determined to find them. The Christmas Day bombing attempt would lead to one of the largest counterterrorism hunts since 9/11. It would reshape how airports screened passengers and how intelligence agencies shared data. And it would push the U.S. into a new era of security, one where the threats were no longer just overseas, but could come from anyone, anywhere, at any time. But just as the FBI began to close in on the network behind the attack, a new and unexpected lead surfaced, one that would reveal a far bigger operation than anyone had imagined.